Hello and welcome to the Design Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Chris Whyte, and in this podcast series, we explore the journeys of founders and leaders from the world of physical product design. In today's episode, I'm joined by Mark Joynson-Bickerstaffe, co-founder of Mark & May. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Chris.
Hello. Yeah, good to have you on. So I'm going to do my best to do a little intro, as we discussed beforehand. But and as we discussed earlier, you described Mark & May as working on product and more. An ethically astute consultancy and lifestyle product retailer founded on the need to create better products, services, and experiences which address the pressing needs of the modern world, a socially, environmentally, and commercially sustainable future. So thank you for kind of giving me the script for that on your LinkedIn profile, Mark. So your academic background is a bachelor's in engineering design from Warwick and a master's in industrial design engineering from the RCA. And throughout your career, you've spent time working for Dyson, Alcatel Optronics, Strix, and Kohler before founding Mark & May in 2019. So we'll dive into your career journey in a little bit, and we'll spend some time talking around kind of Mark & May and your mission there and the value that you add. We'll also dive into some of the things that we discussed on our prep call, such as design leadership and how the role of designers has changed, sustainability, and recruitment challenges, because I know that's a part of Mark & May's offering as well. So, but yeah, again, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me.
An absolute pleasure. Look forward to chewing the fat on many issues.
Let's see how much we can cram into an hour, shall we? So we always start right at the beginning on the Design Journeys podcast. So if we go back to kind of teenage Mark, I suppose, what got you into design, or when did you become aware of design, and what led you down that path?
Yeah, I didn't know what design was really until it's one of those usual things. Mr. Chambers, my design technology teacher at school, gave me the recognition there was this thing called design. My dad was an engineer. I'd always taken things apart and drawn things and sketched and so on. And he was the one who said, there's this thing, it's design, it's industrial design, this is what you do. And I was like, oh, okay. But I still didn't really know what it was. And I took a very strong lead from my dad at that point, who basically was like, you're good at science, good enough. You're good at maths. You can draw a bit. Why don't you do engineering? So I decided that after leaving school, I'd go and do engineering, and absolutely hated it. It was one of those classics that first sort of year found the maths really, really hard, to the point that my dad actually gave me some really good advice, and he put me in touch with an engineer at Rolls-Royce. And that bit of advice was very straightforward. It was like, well, if you think you can do engineering, you can just about scrape through it. Carry on and do it now. Because if you do design first and try and go back and do engineering, you'll find it twice as hard. So that's what I did.
Solid advice. Yeah.
Solid advice, yeah. And I'd actually, I found it hard, the sort of the math side of it, but actually the practical grounding and everything about engineering has been a foundation of what I've done ever since. But I knew I wanted to do more after that. So, I can remember walking down a corridor and seeing a poster for the RCA course in industrial design engineering, as it was at that point, and going, wow, mate, that's what I should do. And as soon as I landed in the RCA, I was lucky enough to get in, wow, it was home.
Yeah.
Absolute home. And I wish the course had been longer, because it was, there's so much that I was learning day on day. But I had also had the huge benefit then that that course at that time, industrial design was a separate course, but you were in the same studio, you weren't segregated, you were mixed. So, I was sitting next to industrial designers doing their course. That's what I learned from them. They learned from me. And, that fueled really the foundation of what I learned as a designer.
Brilliant. Have you got any? Are there any kind of famous alumni that you studied with at the RCA? Because obviously, it's quite a famous institution, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Mark Reitman. Yeah, Mark Reitman was my year. Philip Tracy, the hat designer. Yeah, and then Sean, who went on to lead Philip's design for a long time. He was in my year. Yeah, and so generally, the people that a number of the people there have gone on to do pretty big things in the world of design. Bill Thompson, who I was best man for. He was in the design course. He went on and was high up in Whirlpool, and so it's a great foundation, and a lot of the people go on to do great things. Never mind Dyson, Okay, so lots of people went.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, lots of people go to Dyson regardless of the university course, don't they? Well, certainly more over recent years as it's just become a huge employer. But so yeah, that was your first. From what I can tell, that was your first kind of experience of the real world. Quotes kind of going into Dyson as a graduate. So, and you spent 8 years there and ended up kind of as a new product development director before you left. So. That must have been a really, really interesting journey. And the Dyson back then in the 90s, I imagine, it was a completely different beast to what it is now. Certainly a lot more focused in terms of the product categories, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, when I started, what people don't often realise is when I started, the business was a consultancy. It was licensing technology to other companies. So we had a product in Japan called the G-Force, Johnson Wax in the US, the big corporate had bought and licensed the product. And my first project was a backpack vacuum cleaner concept for them for commercial cleaning. So not many people realize that's where it started. So when I started, that's what I did. And then in parallel, the DCO1 was sort of in development. And then very quickly that took over, and everyone, me included, then was on DCO1 and bringing that through to be the first true Dyson product. Looking back at it now, it's like that's my startup journey, because at that time it was a few people it was a coach house, it wasn't a little dingy studio or anything, but it was a startup, and we did everything. You turned your hand to everything. You worked long hours. You did whatever was required, and certainly the first 7 years of that journey through Dyson was very much about adaptability, flexibility, learning on the job, making a lot of mistakes, building teams of people, and being entrepreneurial, being part of an entrepreneurial growth process, and really just working with passion. I think that's the key thing. We were driven. The businesses started to do really well, and of course that fed our self-confidence and our desire just to keep going and keep driving forwards. It taught me a lot of the fundamental lessons about exploring innovation that's still just as true today. And I still, would come back to when people say, well, how do we do this? Design thinking's the sort of buzzword that's current for what Dyson have been doing all along, and many other businesses. They're not unique. I hate to sort of get obsessed about Dyson as this amazing place. It is, it was. But it's not the only place.
Absolutely. I think a lot of these things were happening. It's just more recently we've got a name or a label for it now.
Yeah, exactly. We've written enough books about it now. Yeah, so we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I never knew that about Dyson. That's really interesting. So how many people were there when you worked then, and how many did it grow to by the time you left?
So when I started, I think there were maybe 5-6 people there, 3 design engineers. So I was sort of in there right at the beginning. Some of those were temporary. I think I was one of the first employees or second employees or third employees. And then when I left, I had in my team 250 people. And the rest of the business was probably another 1,000 people at that time. And we'd gone into the custom-built factory and R&D centre in Malmesbury. And it was hugely expansive. But it was fascinating because, the growth phases you go through as a design leader were all there to see. You go from that, you're small enough, 5 people, less than 10 people, that you all know each other, you work together. Natural leadership emerges, but generally it's relationship based. And then you get above that, and then you have to start introducing structure, hierarchy, the ability to command and control in order to make sense of that. And then you face the challenges that leader faces of, well, you're my friend. Now I have to manage you.
Yeah.
I have to do a performance review. And that ability to then separate, the personal and the professional, learning that, which I think is essential to every leader, is understanding that you're always balancing those two things. The chummy leader who's your mate all the time doesn't work for very long. It's very hard to sustain that as a business grows.
Absolutely, yeah.
Doing it in a sensitive way that maintains the culture of the business you want to maintain is the art form. Because, you can go full corporate, but then it's impersonal and can be effective, but it doesn't carry a lot of, innate culture with it that perhaps you want to maintain in your business. So that's an art form to how you do that. But, learning's all the way through.
Oh, massively, yeah. Especially with the business scaling so quickly and to such a massive degree, and then making that step from senior or kind of team lead to kind of manager and then head of and director. I mean, it's such a different job as well, isn't it? That
yeah. And I think the thing I learned, the lesson I learned from that and sort of get people to think about is it's easy to, success drives growth and you run up that ladder. And if the business is well structured, maybe it has a development scheme that you then are active in and you build skills along the way that support your growth. But quite often they're not. And the reality is, the business needs you in that role, but they're not giving you necessarily the tools and the capability to be secure and capable in that role. And I think the message I'd pass on there is the only person responsible for your development is you. That there's tendency as an employee in a business to think, oh no, I should get that from HR or someone else should give that to me. But I'd say no matter where you are, and I've learned this later in my career as well, no matter where you are, you've got to own that, lead that and drive that because you're the only one who controls your career path. It's up to no one else.
Absolutely.
So never lose sight of that.
Unfortunately, it's a lesson that most of us don't learn until we've been through that, and it's that benefit of hindsight, isn't it? But I definitely look back on the early stage of my career where I was a little bit more of a it's someone else's fault. They haven't done this or and actually, on reflection, it's like I could have pushed harder to kind of set the boundaries or set the kind of what was required in a different career. What could I have done differently? But that's the beauty of reflection, isn't it? So
yeah, exactly.
But so Dyson, I guess, were they? I guess in the 2000 they were working on obviously lots of vacuum cleaners, but would they have gotten? I mean, what other stuff were you working on there? Because now obviously the portfolio is so broad, or was it still kind of predominantly that kind of the core business then?
Well, yeah, I mean the core business, I was there at a great time because we put in place the fundamental R&D for the vacuum cleaners, scientific capability, went back to first principles, relearn that. But actually, the business was always then looking for diversification of product line. So actually, I led lots of programs looking at, robot vacuum cleaners, washing machines, tumble dryers, basically all sorts of appliances that could make a difference, and finding the inventive benefit that we could bring to the market in those areas. So, the R&D labs were basically, they were invention shops with us pursuing, how can we get this to work twice as fast, be twice as good? What fundamental technology can we drive through? The electric motor, that was started at the time that I was there, and we, started pulling a lot of scientists in. It took a lot longer to get to market. I didn't know that at the time, but it took a lot longer to get to market. But, so it became quite diverse. So it went way beyond product design. It wasn't just about embodiment or a different form factor. It was all about fundamental principles, and I can still remember, the inventive step of, for instance, the washing machine. We're working on washing machines, trying to work out what to do. We built a test rig, and in order to load the washing machine the way we wanted to load it, we split the drum down the center. And then clamped it together, and then had two motors rotating it in a single direction. And then,
Right.
in the lab one day with one of the guys working on it, we were like, I wonder what happens if one of them goes the other way around. Let's try it. So off we go, we try it, and suddenly we find that we're increasing, wash speed by, 30, 40%.
Oh, wow.
So, happy accident. The lesson in that is you've got to try things. You've got to be in there, working on it at that level, observing, trying, and happy accidents occur. That's part of invention.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's always struck me as a business that's not afraid to kind of throw resources at innovation and invention. I don't ever recall seeing a Dyson washing machine, but I know from speaking to countless Dyson engineers over the years, there's lots of things that they've worked on that will never see light of day, but they've gone through that process to explore it, and the ones that do tend to go on to be quite successul in terms of the product launches. So.
Yeah, the washing machine was one of the few failures. It did launch.
Yeah. Oh, really?
It did. Yeah, and it sold some, but it's another story that is worth, the story there was, okay, the machine, it was complex, so it was expensive, but Dyson, commanded a premium. People were buying the technology. They saw it as being different, better. So that was fine. But one of the things that participated to it not working in the end was James insisted on it being silver, red, purple, transparent in areas. And most people don't want a spaceship in there because, unlike a vacuum cleaner, a washing machine is on show. And, we sort of knew that if we just did a white one, it would sell in bucket loads because it would just fit in, and not what people want at the end of the day is a machine that works and keeps going and, it's your family life. So that, whether that was it failed after I left, and it's nothing to do with me, of course. But whether that was the sort of the nail in the coffin, but in the end, it didn't translate to enough market sales to stay in the product range.
Yeah, but I guess now you mentioned that you look at some of their products now, they're a little bit more understated. Certainly the hand dryers and things are, there's a clear sense there. So maybe that was an expensive but good lesson for them. Yeah,
yeah, and the air purifiers, they have to fit into a domestic environment. Yes, they're somewhat progressive, but they're not so challenging that you won't live with it.
Absolutely, yeah. I've got one running under my desk now, and it's
there you go.
Yeah, just kind of blends into the office. So it's clearly taken that on board. Yeah. Brilliant. Well, let's move on then. Let's kind of touch on some other areas of your career. So Dyson, you then went over to Alcatel Optronics and Strix after that for a little bit. So Strix are interesting because my understanding is that's more, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but they do kind of the thermostats today for kettle and switches for kettles.
Yeah, and the bases that allow you to disconnect a kettle without unplugging the cord. Yeah. No, the bounce out of Dyson, and I call it a bounce deliberately now. I left Dyson because I started to disagree with James. I started to find myself going, hang on, that's a really good idea. There's a market for that. Why the hell aren't we doing it? So I just had enough. So a headhunter called me, and I bounced into a VC with Alcatel, learned a bit there that actually the skills you learn as a design engineer can be applied even when the science is extreme. The principles remain true. I bounced out of that because that business was sold. It was VC, and then it was sold to Alcatel, and then went to Strix, thinking that could be quite a good place because they were wanting to go into they wanted to diversify. So they were looking at innovation, wanted to diversify, landed with them. And they are all over really high precision, low cost technology that goes into every coffee machine and kettle. And they did a bit of industrial design for customers to, so if Bosch wanted a kettle or Moulinex or Tefal, sometimes they'd get involved in the design of that. So that was part of it. But really they wanted to go into things like water filtration. They were looking at Brito and the market growth there and saying, we want a piece of that pie. And, my role was to try and innovate do a Dyson with them. But of course that doing a Dyson is not just about one person landing, it's about a culture. And the culture in that business was all about command and control with an extreme focus on minute cost. And they found it very difficult to really adopt the attitude of, make, try, fail, learn, move on. And that's how you innovate. And then understanding the market and understanding the consumer. So it was a couple of years with Strix. Interesting, interesting, challenging. But I knew that it wasn't going to last. And that led me to sort of, again, I actually got offered a job at a sort of FTSE 500 stationery business, with 1 million products in stationery.
Okay. Yeah.
And then just before starting, thought, I don't want to do that.
I was all on design pens.
Yeah, I don't want to design pens. So actually, that's the first time I started a business on my own.
Okay.
And I started in lighting products, started to get some interest going there, but then the Kohler company came knocking on the door. And I thought, wow, here's a business.
Definitely not a jump there, was it? Best part of 16 years, I think you spent there.
16 years, yeah. And I never thought I'd be there that long. I thought, partly because I thought I'd just want to go back to running my own business sooner. But it's rare that you find a business that is global, has every material set you can imagine in its portfolio, is a manufacturer, has a design. It's really marketing led, but design has a strong role to play, and has bold in its brand value, and had scale. 16 years of leading design and engineering and working on every product you can imagine in the kitchen, the bathroom space. The only downside of it is you always get you come out of a business like that and you're always a toilet designer.
So was that what you were working on? Because my experience was I worked with the Cheltenham studio and it was showers. So we were recruiting for people for the showers team.
Yeah, it started with showers because it was Kohler, but then really if you look at a business like Kohler, and actually most of these big businesses, their core profit comes from toilets. Toilets, really? Everyone needs one. Every home has one that's got a sewer sanitation system. And they're expensive to make unless you make them locally. They're complex to make, huge investment. And, your toilet range is your key. So you work on a lot of toilets. I worked on a lot of taps, a lot of showers, a lot of baths, a lot of surfaces, a lot of kitchens. Yes. Cabinetry, yes. But you always will have that toilet design moniker in your portfolio.
Yeah, it's an interesting one though, isn't it? Because how do you innovate on a toilet where the design, certainly from the industrial design side of things, hasn't, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it hasn't fundamentally changed for like 100 or so years. And there's efficiency to be made, but if you're making something out of clay or pottery, it's fairly limited there, aren't you?
And there's an analogy here as well, which is it's a bit, let me stick with me. It's a bit like a mushroom, a fungi, in the sense that a mushroom actually is just the flower. The bit you see is just the flower. The actual organism is under the ground, is the mycelium are under the ground. Yeah. Well, that's what a sewage infrastructure is, and a toilet is the bit at the end. So one of the limits on innovation is literally that the bit that's in the ground and in your house is pretty fixed. And the bit above that is limited in what you can play with as a result. However, that said, I think, cultural innovation is driving change, bidet toilets coming in from Japan and China, where cleanliness and hygiene has been a much stronger driver. That technology is coming in. The overall user experience on a toilet, sounds weird to talk about it that way, but it is a very important one for health. And then inclusivity, toilets for a long time have been very poorly designed as you age and for people who are less able. So there's a huge amount of work actually going on in that area as well. So behind the scenes and actually coming into the market gradually, it's changing, it's evolving. And especially with the aging population, there's a huge opportunity still there for toilets that are better suited to us as we age or as we go through our life stages and serving those needs.
it's really interesting as well from a product point of view in terms of I find it interesting in that kind of difference from fast-moving consumer goods or kind of technology that might be replaced every couple of years, maybe when you look at vacuum cleaners, to a something that people very rarely change unless because it's expensive to refit your bathroom. How often do you change your toilet? Maybe.
Yeah, and one of the
never.
Huge, yeah, exactly. But one of the huge things I learned, the contrast between Dyson and Kohler. Kohler is effectively it's an interior design company.
Yeah.
So they're designing products that you live with. They're part of your home. And as a result, design in that context is about aesthetics. That sort of old-fashioned thing of, well, aesthetics is almost a dirty word in some respects. What it looks like being important and being really critical and having style. But actually that's critical because a product that allows you to have your own style, express your own style in your home whilst meeting the cost target, or leads that and shows you a new way of expressing individuality in your home, it's a good design challenge because it's functionality, it's experience, it's aesthetics, it's feel. You're dealing with water or heat or detergent product, washing products. There's a wealth of stuff around that. So it really truly is user experience design, where the balance of it is different to FMCG.
Massively, yeah.
A lot of FMCG products.
I guess a lot of it you were probably selling into contractors and kind of home builders or house builders as well, because I guess that's where a lot of the new sanitary ware goes in, isn't it? But really interesting.
A lot goes through retail as well in the US and China and so on. So but increasingly a consumer market as well. The online, obviously, multi-channel sales now. So that transition means that pretty much you can get it on any channel.
Are you frustrated by drawn-out recruitment processes, missing out on talent to your competition, or wasting time interviewing candidates who don't quite live up to their profile? If you're the founder or leader of a physical technology brand or design consultancy, here's what we can do for you. By working closely with you and your team, Kodu will help you improve your entire existence of hiring. We'll make it easier to identify, attract, and ultimately hire the very best design and engineering talent ahead of or from your competition. You'll only interview candidates who fit the brief, and we'll work with you to ensure you get the outcome you want in a timely manner, which is typically within 6 weeks or less. We have a 100% fill rate, and we guarantee to get you a positive outcome. If we don't deliver, you don't pay. But how can I make such a claim? Well, the short answer is I've been doing this for a very long time now. Our process at Kodu is built from over a decade of my own personal experience recruiting within physical product design and development. I've hired hundreds of designers, engineers, managers and leaders in that time, over 97% of whom are still in post after 12 months. On top of that, I've personally built an incredible network of thousands of professionals in the physical product design and engineering space, covering the UK, US and Europe. And I've taken what I've learned over the years and put the best of that into Kodu. So if you'd like to spend less time stuck in a recruitment loop and more time doing what you love, get in touch. Email chris@teamkodu.com or message me on LinkedIn. But for now, let's get back to the show. Yeah, brilliant. So there's been a few points there. Obviously, Dyson, you got to a point where you were frustrated. It sounds like you had reached a tolerance of kind of how much change you were prepared to not influence. That sounded weird to turn it out loud, but you were frustrated because you couldn't influence the change that you wanted. And then I guess with Strict, you hit a roadblock in terms of the lack of they're saying that they wanted to invest in innovation, but then not. What was it kind of? What were the key lessons from those experiences? And I guess what kind of kept you at Kohler for so long?
I think the key lessons from those are innovation is a culture. And it's not just about having a way of doing things, a personal way of doing things or a proven way of doing things from somewhere else and transplanting it. You have to start with the people, how they think, their ability to act in certain ways. And that comes down to, often is organization and leadership. So start at culture if you want to change a business's innovation. Because you can try, you can implant and do a project, you can pilot something and drive it, but you won't sustain it unless you change the culture. And that starts at the top. So what I learned there was the thing you have to probe most deeply into is what is the leadership attitude to it? And that comes down to that commercial sort of maturity of, what gives freedom in a company. And it's about the leadership. It's about finance. So you have to understand finance, and you have to understand how financial mechanisms and people work and think in organizations to talk in their language when it comes to what innovation can deliver as value. And I guess that's what I learned. So when I went to Kohler, what I saw at the top was creative leadership. Yes. I can remember going into meetings, and literally you had to walk into a meeting with a pile of books sort of this high, and they were stacked full of financial and product analysis, because the business was about control, but actually they had the layer on top of the leadership. It was still is a family-run business. They wanted to lead, and they wanted to lead through design and marketing, and the rest of it was a way to deliver that. It's not without its issues, because that brought in other issues of personality. So the culture there was more aligned. And so trying to make that more innovative was less of a step. The challenge was the scale of the organization. Huge, 35,000 people worldwide. How do you influence that culture? It takes time, and it takes a body of people. It's a different process. So why was it there 16 years? Realistically, because it took probably 3 years to work out what the hell was going on. It took 5 years to really start to make a difference that started to stick. And then some more years for that product line to start coming through to market, to see the change, see the value, and then sort of be able to look back and go, right, what next? Not to say it was completely done. It wasn't, and it never is. But at least we've moved forward, and we'd got over the hurdle which you had at the beginning, which was the only good design really could be done in the US. And the design was exported to the rest of the world because that was the way the brand was defined. Changing that fundamental understanding of the brand is this, it's about how you design into that brand, and that has a local cultural filter on it. What's right for India in the Kohler brand is similar but different to what's right in the US, and the same in China, and the same in Europe. So once we started to get over that, we were able to build studios locally in those environments. And they were able to tap into the real understanding of the user need, the market need, etc., and start to deliver the right product for the market under the Kohler brand.
Yeah.
So there was enough. Yeah. So there was
enough change as you went along. Yeah. Lots to get your teeth stuck into.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. So I've got a question for you then that might be helpful for some listeners going through, say they're looking at like a senior leadership role and looking to maybe interview a few companies. Are there any kind of key questions or things they should be asking or kind of exploring? They're going to help tease out whether there's a culture alignment there for some because there's nothing worse than joining the business and finding out that actually there is a mismatch there and it's not going to work out because it's a waste of time and money for everyone involved. So what would be advice there?
I've touched on it a little bit, which is, don't just probe into, product and engineering, and probe into financial, probe into strategic planning, probe into vision, mission, purpose. And, this is one of the other themes that one of the things I've learned through my career is, invest in your own intuition. Do self-examine, did I feel that was right? And then did it result in what I expected? Because having powerful intuition and trusting your intuition I think is really important as a designer, as a creator, because so much of what we do is truly synthetic. It's not sort of apply this process and you will get a result. It is a very complicated interaction between things that you have to navigate, and often it's subconscious. So your intuition is truly powerful. So when people then talk to you about, why they want to change the business or what they're trying to achieve or the culture of the business or the financial structure and the freedoms you'll have to operate, does it ring true? Does it feel right? And keep probing on that, because a good leader, a good business would welcome that questioning and not become comfortable with you probing into areas that are way outside what you might say is the normal parameters for the job description.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if they're not comfortable or if they're not prepared to answer those questions, then that tells you quite a lot about the culture and the people there. So, brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. So, well, let's talk about Mark and May then. So, obviously, you're at Kohler for kind of nearly 16 years, and then it looks like you launched Mark and May fairly soon after that. So, what kind of prompted that, and maybe tell us just give us kind of a bit of a potty history about kind of the business and what you're up to.
Yeah, Mark. I got to the point at Kohler where I was starting to think, what's next? I was doing global design work, working with great people, enjoying it, but it was like, well, what's my next contribution here? And I've always, as I said earlier, I've always felt inside me that I wanted to try having my own business, working in a small business. And so it got to a point where I thought, okay, if you don't do it now, it just gets harder. And that's another piece of advice to anybody who's thinking about it is, don't think about it, just do it. Yeah, it'll be hard, but just do it, because you'll learn from it. And any employer, if you then choose to go back to employment, will look at it and go, okay, what did you learn? As long as you know what you learn, it's fine. It's good. So, yeah. So,
massively.
I had a reasonable network of people that I could talk to and contacts to go out and try and find work, and so on. So I thought, right, okay, why not? Let's have a go. And then, of course, I launched the business, and then COVID, 2020, COVID, bang.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh God, is this going to be a bad timing? Now I've got none of the support mechanisms I might have if I was employed.
Yeah.
But luckily, I picked up a couple of clients in those early days, and actually Dyson and Kohler served me well, because I got very used to working remotely, working in large organizations, global organizations. Working like this, like being on a podcast, was completely comfortable to me. I'd done it all the time, across cultures, different languages. So that felt okay. So actually I could operate well. And I think clients found that quite appealing, because I could sort of settle them down. It's like, don't panic. This is okay. So I picked up a couple of clients, and actually, what we set out to do with Mark and May was, we talk about ethically astute, conscious, I'd say, is the primary word I'd use. We're a conscious consultancy. We're not saying that the only work we do is world-changing, environmentally sustainable, socially and ethically, transformational work. We believe that you have to achieve that goal by taking one step every time you do work. Sometimes that step can be bigger. Sometimes it's very small. But there has to be a step forwards, and our clients have to be willing to accept the challenge that we are going to push you forwards, because that is how change happens. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow, but it has to happen. So we set up on those grounds, and then the first projects we did, one was you get the weird stuff. So I became CTO for Luwatt, who Luwatt are a sustainable sanitation business helping solve sanitation problems for extended urban communities. So, where you get the slums on the outside of cities in developing countries. No sanitation, hit the trees, horror stories about health, privacy, dignity, security. So really trying to make a difference there. So I helped steer them through getting a product to market that was reliable, that was well engineered, dealing with cost issues, and then working on the next generation product. So that was a great partnership, which is continuing to this day, and obviously, really trying to make a difference to millions of people worldwide. We then did a project with a potato company. Sounds weird, but
Okay.
why they wanted to persuade more of us to buy loose potatoes in supermarkets versus bagged, because obviously the bag is packaging, literally just goes straight in the bin. And we worked with them on several projects which were all about moving the retailers, Tesco's, Waitrose, Sainsbury's, etc., moving their thinking on in how they could retail and sell more loose. And that was a fun project, quite challenging, quite, shopper behavior, a lot about operational efficiency, which is a real challenge, and then you've got wastage. So it's a really interesting project. So that was great. And then we picked up various, different clients. We worked for a client called QuickScreen, and they are in the healthcare space trying to transform infection control in the healthcare built environment. And we've worked with them on several projects that are, really challenging about how you get rid of materials that are either single use, like hospital curtains, or infection traps, like hospital curtains, and all sorts of terribly designed furniture, and continue to work with them in terms of innovating. But also, and this is the sort of product and more bit of Mark and May, when we engage with clients, it's the classic of often they come to us with a brief and say, this is the problem. Please can you, quote, give us a proposal to work with us to help solve this problem. The way we behave as a business is then to immerse ourselves in that client's business and operations. And we always then come back to them 99% of the time and say, yes, that is a problem, but this is the real problem. This is the real problem to be thinking about if you want to really address that issue identified. Quite often that leads to us working on the project and also helping them with organizational development, executive level and at team level, nurturing creativity in business, and helping them really implant improved capability in their own businesses to do better work and drive better results for the company long term. And that's
that's really interesting.
Yeah,
it's so easy to get kind of fixated on one element of the problem or the issue, and actually it's a lot more complex than that. And they're very interchangeable. They're all kind of symbiotic, if you like. There's no good just creating a great product if there's no marketing, or because no one will hear about it. And it's no good kind of designing a great product if there's not the technical team behind it. So I know you get involved in certainly with companies like QuickScreen. I know you help, or you go above and beyond really helping companies kind of sort resource as well, which for a lot of design consultancies that might seem a little bit kind of alien, because if you're helping a business build their design team out, surely that means less work for you in the future potentially.
Yeah, that is it's one of those sort of contradictions in a way, but actually, because of what we stand for, we see that as part of our job, and in a way we say we know when we've done a good job because the client doesn't need that part of our services anymore. And the trust part of it is actually it'll lead to something else. It'll lead to something else.
Absolutely.
They talk to another business and say, oh, yeah, you should think about, or they just ask us to do something else. Oh, what about this part of our business? And another business that we work for, they're a great startup called Meadow, who are innovating.
I know them very well. Yeah.
Sustainable packaging, and I hope they're really successful. But, we went in there and we did a combination of work both on the marketing side, but also on the supply chain side. And that's because going into that business, we saw that actually one of their biggest challenges was understanding their supply chain and mapping out their supply chain as their route to market and success criteria. And actually, given a diverse background and with a design brain, design thinking brain, you can really go in and address and see the problems that are there and start to strategize about how to address them. And then bring in specialists. We never pretend that we're experts in every field. It's the classic consultancy T-shapes. You have the breadth, but you have expertise, but also we know how to bring in expertise to then form a truly expert team for a client. And I think a lot of clients struggle with this, which is, recruitment's, you know this more than anyone, Chris, but recruitment's tricky because, you're committing to someone's life and supporting them, not just an overhead, it's a horrible way to say it, but you want to support them, but you also want to do a lot of things. So their expertise sometimes can be very specialist, but often needs to be a bit generalist. Now, on some projects, you need external help because you want true expertise, but you don't need it long term. You need it for that project. And, that's the other side of what we do, is bring in a truly expert team to do a specific thing, whether that's in supply chain, whether that's in, electronics and software development, whether that's in, nanotechnology. You shape that by building the right team. And then that comes down to, again, it comes back to intuition, experience, and the ability to build the right culture. You need people with the right attitude, fundamentally. Attitude.
Absolutely.
Attitude beats strategy every time. And that's something that everyone should carry with them is, the right attitude will bring you a lot of success. And you shouldn't have to work too hard at motivating people. And when you do, there's something that you need to think about.
Yeah, massively. And on the kind of the more side of things, the value, it's certainly something I've kind of worked on throughout my career, is trying to add as much value as possible. But it's something that's been reinforced more and more kind of as I launched Codu as well, is that I listen to a lot of what Alex Hormozi kind of puts out in his podcast and in his books. And he's very big on kind of give, and then kind of good things will happen. You don't have to ask all the time. But then from a consultancy point of view, he's got a really interesting take, which I think marries up with kind of how you've run Mark and May, is that you use consultancies or agencies, whether they be advertising, recruitment, business, design, or whatever, show from. You buy that expertise in that you don't have, and you have a short, sharp hit. It's expensive, but it's extremely value-packed. And the way that he uses them is to have an agreement with them that he'll use them on projects, but every time that he works with a consultant or an agency, he wants to upskill his current team. So they should be leaving the business in a better shape as well. So over time, you end up becoming less reliant on the agency. But the agency wins as well because they're building up good rapport, good testimonials, great kind of social credit, if you like. And that's the lifeblood of any kind of value-packed businesses, those recommendations, because you're going to do much more with that than any kind of generic marketing campaign.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
I think all too often these days people sort of think that the app or the system can replace relationship. And actually relationship, we're human, we're people. And we talk about soft power, the reality is truly effective teams, truly effective businesses have a lot of soft power. Necessarily the ones who are out there shouting in your face the whole time. They're the ones who are getting on doing it and doing it well, and being self-critical and being motivated to do better. And that's soft influence, soft power way of doing it often is more effective. You've got to know where the limits are, because there has to be a discipline underneath it. But really, that's what. And people want to work in places like that. They want to work in places that they can be themselves, be their best selves, and deliver great work. But understand this is not a creche. It's not a place you go, kick back and do nothing. You're there to do a job of work, and you should expect to work hard.
Absolutely. So a lot of the work that you've been doing with Mark and May, obviously working with startups, but there's a big emphasis on kind of meaningful and impactful products and the sustainability angle. So was that a purposeful kind of, was that by intention, or is that just kind of like a happy accident?
No, I mean, I came out of Kohler Kohler has a innovation for good, which goes beyond sort of corporate CSR tick box. And that sort of, I did some work in that area when I was at Kohler, and it's funny because it goes right back to roots. I did my engineering degree was engineering design for appropriate technology, and appropriate technology being appropriate to the environment you put it in. There's no point putting a complex machine in Africa that when it breaks, it can't get spare parts and no one can fix it. So actually, it's always sort of been there as an underpinning to what I do. But I just felt that, these days, people who create products have a responsibility that goes beyond, their job. We are in our first acts of creating concepts and sketches and whatever. We are laying down a foundation of impact. And we need to be cognizant of that and need to own that. Otherwise, nothing will change. Work just for consumption and profit is, of course, we all need to earn money. Businesses need to earn money, but we equally have to become better and better at that. And the imperative needs to be being more efficient, being better. And as I said earlier, step by step. So we did set out and say, we want to do projects that move the needle forwards. I'd love it to be in big strides, but I'd accept it being in small strides based on how far we can push an individual client, how far we can work with them, what that change can bring. But would we work in defence? No. So some simple boundaries. And I think all of us do have to have our moral boundaries that we stand by. So we did set out with that stall, and some businesses come to us and it's not on their agenda at all. It's not there. You say, where does this fit into? It's not on their agenda. We then open them up with questioning to say, but do you want to be better? Are you willing to be open to be better? Because that's the creative's job, is then to show them how being better doesn't necessarily have to cost them lots more or make a risk in the marketplace of consumers accepting it. That's about design. That's design. And that's the constraint that we love is, make it really hard, but have the skills to then, attack the problem and try and solve the problem in better ways. I'm a true believer, we're in a phase now where we've got to experiment. And, yes, there's things that appear to be green or better and don't actually result in it being, see that later and go, okay, what have we learned now? I'm not going to do that again. But we have to try.
Absolutely.
To sit on your hands and say, no, it's too expensive, it's too difficult, I think is no longer acceptable. And designers, I think, should stand for that. I recognise hugely that being a designer, say, you're at the start of your career or you're in your career ladder and you may be slightly worried about championing that in a business that doesn't seem to want to do it. And that it seems a sort of too big a mountain to climb. I just say in that respect, either change jobs or understand it from a value perspective in that business and start to, understand the why behind it. Why is there resistance? And it will always come down to some sort of money related issue and then attack that. And you might have to do that on your own for a bit to build up your understanding of, fine, that will add to your credibility in the business because you're truly understanding. And then think about small changes that might start to make a difference. So that's our attitude with businesses is, we don't go in there expecting huge transitions and transformations. We go in there hoping for that and accepting a small change.
If you can provoke a thought or just put it on someone's radar, like when it wasn't before, that's a win, and if you keep doing that and keep kind of speaking to people about it, then it's going to build some traction. I think it's definitely there. So just those little things are cumulatively going to add up. I'm conscious we're running out of time, but we've kind of covered a lot of the topics, I think, throughout the journey. But we were talking about kind of design leadership, and I think you've kind of just touched on there as well in terms of how it's changed and the responsibility that designers have. But Yeah, perhaps if you've got any more insights or thoughts on that and how the role of designers has changed over the years, we could touch on that briefly for a few minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I learned was, obviously, typically as a designer, you'll be very hands-on all the sort of foundational tools that you need to use as you're in your early stage of your career. And quite often you'll then, if you've got the desire or the ability to progress to leadership and management, having that foundation is really critical to credibility and trust as you then step into leadership. You know what it takes to do the job. But then as you progress as you continue to progress in leadership, the time between when you were last on those fundamental tools and the state of those tools changes, and you won't be able to operate the CAD system that the team are using, or you won't be able to use the analysis tools because simply you haven't got the opportunity to do so. I'd say that your job is to really understand the fundamentals that dictate the way that that job is done, but not have to do it. Your job is to translate that into leadership understanding, the ability to tell other people about it, to make it simple for other people to understand. Because the challenge that most leaders face in organizations is, why does it cost so much? Why does it take so long? Can't we do it another way? And you have to find the language in yourself to communicate and understand, give understanding to others in simple ways about what certain things require and why. So this skill of communication, making the complex simple, making design speak, non-design speak, is critical for a leader. And I think you have to work at that. It's not acceptable to bombard people with jargon and hope they just get bored and say, I can't be bothered. Yes, that's not enough.
Yeah.
And that is a skill. And I'd say, think about that. It's something you have to work at. When you catch yourself going into it, you have to say, hang on a second. They're glazing over. I need to take this to a different level. And I think that intellectual challenge is a good one. I think that's where reading into the subject, reading with diversity is important, because if you just read in the design channel or listen to podcasts in the design channel, you will just reinforce your own sort of language. Go outside that, and listen to people from different perspectives. And
yeah, massively
form your ability to communicate because at the end of the day, leadership is about most things. It's just about people, understanding them, understanding how they work, what triggers they've got, how to motivate, compassion, empathy, work at those things. Arrogance doesn't get you so far, but it is important to have that energy and passion and drive and to be able to share that, but not to overstep the mark into arrogance and the perspective that you don't care.
Absolutely, yeah. I think there's a book I've been recommending to a lot of people recently, whether they're kind of looking for a new job, if they're middle to senior designer, or whether they're offered this to a lot of design consultancy owners as well, in terms of just to help them negotiate and kind of pull out opportunities. But Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. I don't know if you've read that, but I absolutely swear by that book. I have it on my desk. Yeah. I've got the. There we go. I don't know if I get any commission for that, but I get so. Started reading it, and then I started doing this. Actually, I'll listen to it on Audible, and I'll buy the book as a reference, because it's for anyone that hasn't come across it. Chris Voss was a former FBI hostage negotiator, and he's taken these lessons that he's learned and put them into this book, and it's a really solid toolkit for kind of. He says talking anyone into or out of just about anything. So whether it be negotiating bedtime with a child, negotiating a pay rise or a discount off a car, it's basically for coming up to a win-win resolution for both parties. And I could see this working really well in that scenario where you've got kind of stubborn leadership that are maybe not in tune with design thinking or design leadership, and a frustrated kind of manager or leader wanting to get their views across. The tools and techniques in this book in terms of active listening and labeling and mirroring serve us so well as human beings, let alone kind of people who want to make a difference. That would be my recommendation. Are there any that you can recommend or sources?
A final tip on leadership, I'd say, is the combination of speaking truth to power and action. It's a killer combination. Leadership doesn't like hearing hard truths, and they find it uncomfortable. And you may find it uncomfortable in the way they respond, but they can't criticize action. If you're then bringing to them good results, good things, exciting and interesting things, that combination is really good at getting people to see things differently. You have to take a bit of, there is a little bit of confrontation in it that's hard to manage sometimes, but actually that's part of your job. Part of your job as a leader is you got to run cover sometimes, and deal with it, communicate around it. But then in terms of what reading, and certainly I like to talk about reading around things. I'm reading this at the moment. Homo Deus by. Well,
I've not read that one. No.
Okay, so it's a great read it's called A Brief History of Tomorrow. So as a designer, thinking about futures and so on, but it's fascinating because it gives you that perspective of, we tend to think about consumers today and our understanding of it. And it's really coming at it from a psychological and philosophical point of view about where are we going and why are we behaving some of the ways that we're behaving now, because we're coming so distant from the need to survive.
Yeah.
Most of us are so remote from that's not part of our makeup anymore. So it's fascinating in terms of giving you little perspectives on thinking about why people behave in certain ways, what is it that we're doing, why we should be thinking differently. And then the other thing I'd say that I'd recommend is go back and listen to IDEO Futures number 44. Steve Bassel, he wrote a book called The Way to Design. The reason that's interesting is he's working in an investment company at the moment. So he's coming at it with a different perspective, but it's full of really thought-provoking ways to think about design in business environments. And I'd really recommend listen to the podcast or buy the book. Really interesting.
I'll definitely check that out. I love things like that where it's kind of, taking kind of someone's experience from a different industry and applying it successfully to something completely different. And, and like exactly. I say, never split the difference. You'd think it's more of a sales book, but it's useful in so many ways.
It's a life skill book.
Massively. So I'll check that out. And what was the other one that you mentioned? Because I couldn't quite see it on the screen.
What, Homo Deus? Is that one?
Homo Deus, yeah.
Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari.
Brilliant. What I'll do is I'll link those in the show notes, but and obviously the split the difference as well. But that kind of brings us really nicely, because I usually make a point of asking about book references, but it flowed quite nicely into the point you were making there. But yeah, we're coming to the end of the podcast. So if people want to find out more about Mark and May, is there a better way to reach out to you? Just LinkedIn or email?
Yeah, LinkedIn, fine. My email's on LinkedIn as a contact as well. Yeah. The website, markandmay.com, is, it's a good starting point. Feel free to, email me, get in contact. Very, one of the things, as we talked earlier about give, I'm very happy to talk to anybody, and, no obligations, just, you want to have a chat for half an hour, that's fine. I think you learn a lot, you all gain a lot. I learn as much as anybody out of that conversation. So, it's a great way of building a community that tries to make a difference.
Absolutely. I definitely buy into that. And I think we've known each other for about a year now, haven't we, since the design huddle that I ran with LV last year. But I've always enjoyed our conversations. I always come out and feeling that I've gained something from it, and hopefully you felt the same way, but I certainly have kind of come away with some value. And So yeah, I can attest to that. Anyone reaching out to Mark, you're going to have a very interesting conversation at the very least. So yeah, Mark, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. And yeah, thanks again.
Likewise. Thank you very much, Chris, for organising this and hosting the podcasts. They're always fascinating. So thanks very much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Design Journeys podcast. I hope you found it insightful and inspiring. If you did, please consider sharing it with a friend or colleague who might enjoy it too. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Before I sign off, just a quick note from me. Besides hosting this podcast, I'm also the founder of Kodu, a recruitment business that specialises in physical product development. We help startups, established brands and consultancies find top-tier mechanical design and development talent, often in as little as 6 weeks. At Kodu, we're all about providing an outstanding experience, with our clients and candidates consistently rating us plus 88 on the Net Promoter Score, or NPS, which is world-class in recruitment. Oh, and I should probably mention we have a 100% fill rate too. The inspiring people I've met over the years in consumer electronics, e-bikes, medical devices and beyond have been the reason behind creating this podcast. If you'd like to know more about Kodu and how we can help your business, feel free to visit teamkodu.com or connect with me, Chris Whyte, on LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.